With the Division approaching, talk of expected frustrations are dying down, only to be replaced by a familiar topic of contention: microtransactions. This spectre hangs over the head of so many titles now, and I wonder who it is that actually calls the shots when it comes to microtransactions. That's a discussion that must have happened somewhere along the line in a game's development. I struggle to believe that that suggestion would come from the dev team. It seems far more likely to arise from the bean counters on the publisher's side. Now, I personally, as is often the case, don't flat out hate microtransactions, like I often don't flat out hate many things that people seem to get very het up about in the gaming community. Any subjective issue, it's rarely black and white, and very often people just like to see things black and white than actually bother to look into details or think about it in any significant way. When are microtransactions okay? Well, the obvious first choice is cosmetic items, things to make you look like a pretty princess. Personally, I couldn't care less, as my default choice of weapon skin is matte black. Other options that could be acceptable might be collectibles or some other item which does not affect things when encountering other players. I think it also is dependent on the type of game and the time at which microtransactions are available. For example, say a game has been out for a year and they are just releasing new content that would inspire new players to hey, pick up the game. But maybe these players want some items to help them carry through that earlier part of the game that others left behind. I'm also okay with that. Another example would be with FPS games old and new. Now, I am not advocating paid weapon unlocks day one, that would be crazy, although you might argue this is exactly what some pre-orders offer. Fast track packs though offered later down the line, say 6 months or even a year after release, and then only unlocking existing items available through XP, I feel this is acceptable. And before you throw stones at me, consider the positives here. People who lead very busy lives or who maybe picked up an older game like Bad Company or even Battlefield 3 may not want to grind through every unlock. This obviously comes at a price in terms of experience and player progression for that user, but it would barely impact others and gives them a consumer choice to best use their time. So what are the transactions that are not okay? The key to this question is primarily when. If it's in the first 6 months of a game, I consider that outrageous, game-breaking and flat-out abusive. Most obviously, any items, passive or aggressive, that benefit you over others. This could be anything from a gun, unobtainable otherwise, or a bag with more slots, heads up Division, or any stat modifier. No matter how small the benefit, if it's available to pay for in the initial release timeframe of, say, I would argue maybe 6 to 10 months, then it's a slap in the face to other players who paid their money for the game like anybody else, but who didn't expect that to win a fight or simply spend 25% less of their time grinding, that they would need to be paying anything as much as 50% of the RRP, again, not for a single item, but for, multiple items. Because, make no mistake, microtransactions add up and they are rarely available for pennies. It's not just about the PvP experience either. It can apply to anything, because by providing stat modifying items exclusively available as microtransactions, it is arguable how impartial would developers be when it comes to encounters and how the mechanics of the gameplay. One would very much hope that no mainstream element of the game would alter to encourage the use of paid items, to save yourself the pain of the grind. I'm looking at you, free-to-play mobile games. If the items indeed are more of a shortcut, then yes, it's a lesser crime, but it's a crime nonetheless. At its simplest, the decision itself to include microtransactions from day one in any major game release is enough to make players feel at the least irritated, at the worst cheated and ripped off. Considering the price of most AAA titles, I think it's a considerable insult to the players to include any microtransactions in the initial release and play period. Later down the line, shortcut if you must. It's another example of monetizing everything possible whenever possible, and it's just unpleasant to have to deal with that, and it's definitely enough to put me off a developer, publisher, or a series of games completely if it was implemented badly enough. Tell me your thoughts below. Can microtransactions ever be acceptable in a AAA game, and if so, what form would they take? Thanks for watching today, guys. If you enjoyed, hit that like, help support me and the channel. This is Luton.